Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sounds like a
Okay.
Verizon commercial.
I had to reboot. Sorry about that.
I'm in trouble now.
Yeah, I've been trying to reboot for years, but it doesn't work.
Try putting them on your feet.
Yeah, they fit better over my head.
Yes, that's exactly. Aha! It's even what the Goon Show does. It completely disorients everything you say for the next 20 minutes.
Oh, at least.
I tried rebooting my mind a long time ago.
We'll try it with the skull cap. That way, God notices you.
Well, what is that old saying? Well, of all the things I've lost over my life, I miss my mind the most.
Yes, I remember that. But quick, let's get off the topic before that deer starts talking.
So I guess we'll start.
So where's Hadaway and
Alvin
Well,
will not be joining us due to some bad decision making, I think. And I don't know about Dave Hadaway, but you know.
Oh, yeah. This is well, we're going to have to enjoy ourselves twice as much. That's all.
All right.
Guys, let's use the AI companion for the presentation. Then it will record and we can summarize the talk.
Yes.
I
I
thought
just
it
did a
was
send
recorded.
request to whoever's the
Jack
admin.
Reed is still muted and blurred. And Eric B. Who is Eric B?
It's me. I'm in Thailand,
Yaki.
Oh, you're in Thailand.
So
and I don't have I'm not using my video.
yeah,
they won't let him move over there.
Not many people are decent around me.
Don't chew gum and
Oh, that kind of decent.
Singapore.
It's my favorite kind of decent.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm all gooned up. So somebody please start topping so I can reorient myself to present time and place.
All right, I'll start. A few things to note. Share my screen and show you if this works. Can you see it?
Nicholas has started screen sharing.
Ooh, ultra hard. Oh no, ultra HD.
4K Ultra HD, yes.
This is the new Best Buy media department.
This is what?
It's empty.
This is the new Best Buy media department.
Oh my God.
And what do
I've seen this at 3 stores.
What do we infer?
No more media.
Well, the media is all downloadable, so they're just saying, no, they're not going to carry DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs.
Except that if you want, quality video, you don't get it over a stream. I'm sorry. You just don't.
You can get, it looks pretty good. It doesn't always look good.
True.
But no, it can look very 4K-ish. Even porn, when it's well done, looks really great.
Well, I tell you that nothing beats having a silver disc in your player.
There's also some program material that can't be done by broadcast, like surround sound.
Believe me, you don't want Dolby Atmos in your house. I've turned off all the Dolby Atmos when it comes to music. And it's just a terrible job with music.
Some of this stuff is still using DTS too.
A few months ago, I was in Philly at a Dolby presentation, and the audio was abominable.
Yeah.
I will tell you, on a 4K disc, I think you get a couple of choices of audio. So you choose your poison. But I'm sure the video is compressed. I remember doing a quick test, watching a 4K disc, and I was seeing 140 megabits coming off the disc.
Ooh.
Well, next time you're here, we'll play Lawrence of Arabia and stream it and see how it looks. For those who are out of reach in Thailand, the last Monday of every month, for the last 45 years, I've had a music party.
I think I've been there.
Huh?
I think I've been to your salon.
It's an audio now. It's an audio video salon because there's a projector behind me.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
big projector.
Probably 2018-ish.
that's great. Well, things have advanced a little bit. The year 2018.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing to note, I've seen Dune 2.
Uh-oh.
I've seen it twice. I
That's-
saw it for the first time at my local theater, which is the Gardner Cinema. It's nothing fantastic. It has digital projection and average theater sound, but it's small theaters, and so you get close and the sound is decent. The second time I went to the IMAX Natick, Jordan's IMAX there, which has seat shakers, and that's a special experience. And so I will make the following offer. I'm going tomorrow to see Dune 2 at the IMAX Natick at 10 a.m. Sorry, that's the first show. And if you contact me by this evening, I will save you a seat. But you have to get there and buy your own seat. And the seat shaking makes a difference. The score is tremendous. The sound effects are tremendous. It's all over the top stuff. I'm not going to claim it's ultra natural or anything like that, but if anybody wants to go, I'm going to get there like at 9 in the morning, because last time I went for a 10 o'clock show, there was a big crowd.
Wow, good for them.
Yeah. Now the thing about the IMAX is, unfortunately, is they only show movies on like Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. There's only 2 or 3 shows a day. So Dune is going to be there through next weekend, and then it's gone. So you'll never see Dune in IMAX again, I think.
IMAX, what do you
quite an
mean?
experience,
How
huh?
big is the screen?
I don't know. It's like
50 feet.
70 by 90, something like that. It's big. It's a format that's a little odd. It's very tall. The image is very tall. I had to sit forward of the median, and so I was looking up. And it's not horrible. The perspective is a little off.
Is it
But
as wide as Cinerama?
It's not as
wider.
it's not as obliquely wide. I mean, it's very wide. If you shrink the top, it'd be as wide as Cinerama,
Right.
but it also goes up and down, as opposed to left and right.
But it's
Yeah.
not round.
It's a flat screen.
Flat screen.
Yeah,
No,
right.
it's a spherical screen, I think.
Oh, wait, you mean what?
I believe it curves up
Yeah.
above you, and it curves left and right.
Yeah.
That's my
Is that
understanding.
right? So the projector accommodates that kind of geometry?
They
The
got special
lenses.
lenses.
Yeah, the lenses do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it will focus, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's all in focus.
Yeah, my first
mean-
experience with IMAX was in the Smithsonian, where they have an IMAX, and they were doing a movie called oh God, what was it? I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, it was about what you see when it starts is a standard def picture. It's To Fly is the title of the movie, and you're watching these people get into a balloon basket, and then you're watching the balloon go up, and then focuses on one of the guys in the basket, and then they pan the camera and open up the whole screen, and literally it's almost 180 degrees both ways, and you are 200-300 feet off the ground. And if you have any kind of problem with balance or whatever, you kind of go as you suddenly look like you're 200-300 feet in the air in the balloon basket, and it's quite impressive when it's done right.
I was at an IMAX theater at one of the Great Americas one time, and all day long I was riding all the rides, had no problem. I went into the IMAX theater, sat up close, and there was this image of roller coasters and stuff. I got sick.
Yeah, it's
Now-
it's quite impressive, but
Yes.
it's very engaging, shall we say.
Yeah, and I want to confess that there are 2 kinds of IMAXs. There's digital ones and there are film ones, and I think this is a digital one. I don't know for sure where there are any local film ones.
You think one is better in quotes than the other?
Some people swear by film. I'm not sure that the resolution of film is equal to the current digital resolution,
I
but
think
it was an impressive thing anyways.
I think film is higher. I don't know if it's been scanned to its maximum capacity.
Could be because they're using a super frame.
Yeah, they do use a super frame. It's God, it's ginormous. It literally is it's bigger than a credit card. Each of the frames. If you
It's a 70 millimeter film run vertically.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's a 70 by 90 frame. I'm not sure, but that number.
No, it's actually run horizontally. I've seen it on the
I saw 2001 in 70 millimeter when it first came out.
Yep.
And that was impressive.
Yeah, it damn sure was.
Well, that was done by Cinerama, and it was the first film not shot with the Cinerama 3 camera format.
Ooh.
Did you see the original issue in New York when it first came out? Because I have a memory of a scene in 2001 that I've never seen since in any of the iterations of the movie. And it's a scene without which you can't understand the movie. And it was there when I went to New York to see it. I was an intern at a hospital, and I went to New York to see it. And there was a scene in which the astronauts are sitting in front of Hal and talking about how long you can survive outer space without a helmet. And it was about like 10 seconds, they decided. And so later when they're locked out, if you've seen that scene, you have to count down 10, 9, 8, 7. But that scene has not been in any Blu-ray or any other laser disc that I've seen in all the years since then.
But it sounds familiar, Richard.
I don't remember it.
I wasn't hallucinating it, I don't believe. I wasn't stoned or anything at the time.
Okay, Hal is watching them with this discussion and he's reading their lips.
Yeah.
And he understands what they're saying, but they don't know that he understands. And then I don't know, it might not be the same scene.
No, it's part of that same. It's either in that scene or it's before that.
The scene where he's reading the lips, they're talking about freezing him out.
They were hiding they went into a thing that they thought closed them out, but there was a port visible that Hal could see through.
Yeah, they went into a lock, a space lock.
Right. But this was way before that. This was earlier when you first meet them having lunch or whatever they did at the beginning of their sequence. And it said, well, how long do you think someone got locked outside, you could survive without a space helmet? And they, blah, blah, blah. And that led right to the scene where they were locked out, and it added to the suspense about, well, are they going to get back in time?
Well, I think the bottom line was they probably got a lot of feedback from the actual NASA and a few other organizations, because it'll happen a lot faster than that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot faster. Your body literally bursts in the vacuum of outer space.
Yep.
That actually, that depends. If you remember the actual.
Are you wearing them or what?
No, if you remember the event, Hal, I can't remember the name of the astronaut, I'm sorry, but Hal hits the astronaut's hose from his backpack to his helmet.
Yeah. Right.
You remember seeing the astronaut sort of spiraling around, as a vent. So that would be a much slower pressure drop.
Yeah. Well, now, it would be a pressure drop, but it wouldn't last.
The second guy opens the airlock from his pod without his helmet on, because his helmet was left back in the airlock.
Right.
So he would get a rapid decompression, but he decompressed into another airlock and floated around for a few seconds and managed to close the door. Those are the depressurization events of 2001.
Yeah, if you've got a spacesuit on or something, I suppose, with a hose, it would not vent quite as fast. But let me tell you, it's fast. I worked at when I was working for one of the defense contractors we had a pressure chamber that could be brought up to like 60 or 70,000 feet altitude. And during one of the tests that was being run on one of the gear, they had these large rubber corks that plugged the holes in the side of the thing to feed cables and instrumentation cabling through. And the plug was actually started to get pulled into the chamber. And one of the technicians reached in to grab it and got his arm sucked in. And it took them almost 20 or 30 minutes to depressurize the chamber. They couldn't just open the door. It was like, I guess, way up there. And when they finally got his arm extracted, luckily he did not lose his arm, but they said it was completely blue from the shoulder down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Anybody old enough to have seen the original Cinerama?
I don't remember it, though.
I
Three
did,
screen.
but it wasn't Cinerama. It was 70 millimeter.
Well, it was
There
three
are-
screens.
It
Yep.
was, yes, but it was not Cinerama.
Are we talking
It was
about
the
2001
first-
or just
No,
it
Cinerama?
no, we're talking about movies in general now.
Okay.
No, the Cinerama decided it was too expensive. And when it came to producing 2001, they used Todd AO.
right.
Yeah.
Cinerama, you could see the boundaries between the three cameras that are operating.
Hmm.
Just
Right.
about all the 7 Cinerama movies have been reshot with a lot of color correction. They've been stitched together and they're in what's called a smile format.
Yeah, I got one of
it
those.
sort of dips down square and the bottom and top
Huh.
like a big Cheshire cat.
It works.
And it gives you the illusion of looking into a deeply curved screen.
Yeah.
That's good. The boundaries, the borders, that because they wasn't digital, they were analog. They couldn't have a seamless scope across the three projectors.
Right, but to recreate the discs they produced about 10 years ago did
Could fix it.
a job where if you don't know there were seams, you wouldn't pick it
Good.
up.
That's great. Seems like old time.
Yeah.
Okay. The final topic I'd like to bring up is Barry Ober, who was our webmaster, passed away, and I took up the mantle of webmaster and sat down with the website and figured out, how it went together and how to modify it month to month for our, meeting notices and all that kind of stuff. And I'm looking for a new webmaster. And it's not so bad. It's written in HTML, old-fashioned sort of stuff, and it's pretty logically organized. I will sit down with you and train you how to do it. I have a workflow diagram and notes and things like that. In order to do it, you will need a pretty high-speed line because the first thing we do is to back it up and then download the backup, and it's a 6 gigabyte backup. You need to do that in a couple hours or, something reasonable. So I'll put that out there. Contact me if you're interested.
Getting old.
So
Yeah.
are we all.
It ain't for sissies.
True. Any rate, I guess we should start the meeting.
I'm sorry there aren't more of us.
Unless there's anybody else who wants to make some comments or something to start with.
No, I've just been sputtering with a bunch of folks, and I don't think anybody, maybe Dick is here, Rich Goldwater, about some of the GBH modes of broadcasting the BSO concerts, which are grim. And I do not get WCRB, which is the only analog version down here in Rhode Island. So I am forced to go either to GBH2 HD, or what I've recently done is gone over to the higher bit stream rate that they use for streaming online, which is, I think, what did what did Mark Fishman tell me? I think it was like 138 kilobits per second or something, which does give reasonably decent sound, except for the fact that what they're doing at Symphony Hall, apparently, the production crew is using evidently a large amount of microphones. I don't know exactly how many are suspended over the stage in Symphony Hall, but they blend them all together into 2 channels. And first of all, the imaging is a little strange, to say the least. And when you hear the applause, it sounds like it's coming from the other end of a 200-foot pipeline, sewer pipe. It's really grim, and and the thing is, as you get, and it may just be the fact that it's processing for streaming, but as you get down to the lower bit rates, which I believe GBH's HD2 is like 48 or 24 kilobits per second or something. It's really disastrous. And it sounds horrid. It really does. Curiously enough, when they go back to their standard pre-recorded broadcasts, things are fine. But the live...
What do you mean standard pre-recorded? You mean earlier, from years ago?
Well, that goes back to the BSO broadcast. I'm just talking about if they go back to like the normal everyday broadcasting they do from recordings, they will sound great, even on HD.
But the problem may be the microphones, you know. It may be.
They're using
too many of them. They're using so many.
Oh, yeah, they're using way too many. They literally
impossible.
have about 9 microphones in a grid over the stage, which I understand, but when they produce the recording for broadcast, they used to have a separate broadcast only mixing panel or sub channel set up in the hall, and they don't do that anymore. They just take the straight multi-mic mix and farm it out apparently into the stream or into the broadcast.
John Allen is the expert on this.
Yeah, well, also so is Steve O'Ades. Steve has been very intimately involved with the BSO for quite some time. And John Allen has actually taken the broadcasts or the tapes that are run, or the, not tapes, they don't do it on tape anymore, but the digital recordings of the Boston Philharmonic concerts. And he re-edits them. From
Who does? O'Ades does?
No, John Allen.
John Allen does. Yeah,
John F. And he edits them down to a decent 2-channel, but he does use, he gets, I guess, a 5 or 8 channel audio stream in the digital format, and he edits it down, but he uses basically the Paul Klipsch method or the Jack Renner method of 3 basic front mics, and then at very low levels, like 20 dB down, he will go ahead and mix, you know, if necessary, highlight certain areas or instruments, but it's fundamentally a 3-channel sound, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
The broadcasts are terrible.
If any of you folks get Audio Express, my latest article is in the April issue, and it's a redo of an AC control unit that I built about 25 years ago for one of the guys in the Maryland club who's interested, and it talks about some of the common problems you have with AC power, both externally and internally in your house. So if anybody's interested, it's out there in the April issue.
Cool.
How does the AC power, I mean, from hum or buzz?
Well, if you read the article, it outlines a number of things that you can get. You can get power problems right from the generator. You can get line distribution problems. You can get voltage regulator.
How does that affect the audio? How does that affect audio?
Pardon?
How does that affect audio?
It depends on how good your equipment is. If you have really good equipment with great power supplies, it'll never see it. If you have what is typical out there, especially in the high-end audio, it's pretty grim.
I chair a committee at a trade association called the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, whose mission is to promote the use of solar power and train installers and deal with regulators. The committee I chair, called the Customer Grid Edge Committee, deals with all things behind the meter on premises. We had a featured speaker 2 weeks ago who builds power conditioning equipment for typically the rich and famous, people with large houses who put in expensive audio systems and lighting control systems, and occasionally have their equipment damaged by glitches on the power line. So the company that spoke was called Rosewater Energy, and they put in a huge stack, like a 6-foot rack of equipment, to filter the power and provide battery backup to smooth the power.
Well, the thing that I have is quite a bit less than that, but nonetheless, it does handle probably the most common problems that you'll find. And I outlined it in the magazine, the things that I think I have found that have been problems, including like power factor correction circuits that the power company has out on the line, and capacitors going bad and giving you all kinds of noise. And another major problem is if you have a storm and one part of the grid drops out, the grid connections usually will retry 3 times to reconnect that part of the grid. Well, every time that happens, you get a huge drop in voltage, and you know, your AC line bounce will kill your equipment. And by the way, my circuit doesn't fix that, but if it sees that, it just turns off, and it doesn't try to turn on until you push the button to start it again. It's simple, but it works.
Yeah,
I understand power quality is getting worse as people put in more switching power supplies and LED lamps.
LED lamps? What? That's a problem?
They generate a lot
Yeah,
of
They generate a lot of what?
radio frequencies into the line, because they are using an inverter system to power the DC LEDs. And they're just, there's all kinds of crap and fuzz that are on the lines.
Some are better than others.
The electronics to run the LEDs are in the base of the cheap lamps. And when I say cheap, they cut every corner possible. That's why LEDs, which are rated to last 30 years, will burn out in a year because of crappy electronics.
Yeah, I'll be doing an article later this year because there's a lot of talk about switch mode supplies that are supplied with equipment and the high frequency noises that they generate. And I did a bunch of measurements, and what I found out, you know, everybody says, well, you got to go to a linear power supply. No, if the switch mode supply provides enough power, all you have to do is build the filter to go in between the switch mode supply and the equipment you're powering. And I've got, you know, scope traces that show everything that's going on, but that'll be probably November, December this year.
We'll all be dead by then.
I hope not. One of the things that intrigued me recently, I've been walking the neighborhood with the dog, and just to keep myself amused, I've noticed that when the poles have a transformer on them, they run a stake from the transformer case down the pole and into the ground where the transformer is on the pole that the transformer is on. So about every 6 or 8 poles, there's another transformer, because they're dividing the high voltage down for the local 220 that has to be then split and fed elsewhere. And that has got to generate tons of ground loops. And that itself can cause problems.
I think the stake in the ground is there to create 2 phases from the 240 volts. Well, actually, the transformers bring it from about 13,000 to 240, and then the stake provides the 2 phases of 120.
Either that, or they center tap the transformer and drop the center tap into the ground.
They do center tap the transformer.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the 120 is created by the ground at your house. I think it's done at your house.
Excuse me.
Yeah, there is also grounding at your home.
At the transformer, if you look at it, you've got line 1, line 2, and you know, on the secondary side, and you've got the neutral, and those 3 lines come to your house. Line 1, line 2 are insulated, and the neutral is just a twisted aluminum wire. So that gives you your 120 from the line 1 and line 2, 240. But what is happening at the pole is they are referencing the neutral to ground. In theory,
Right.
it doesn't have to happen, but
So you're getting plus 120 and negative 120 in your house.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the phase, they're 180 degrees out of phase with relationship to the neutral. And by the way, that's another problem that you've got to really worry about. I have run across many cases where the neutral connection back to the pole is intermittent, and unless your loads on line 1 and line 2 are exactly balanced, which never happens, you're going to get voltages that significantly go up and down from 120 volts. So the neutral problem is a very serious problem.
Yep, my brother suffers from that.
Well, he should get a hold of his power company, because he can, I mean, that is a substantial problem. I mean, in theory, if that neutral lifts, and you have a huge load on one side of the line, and you have a tiny load on the other side, that tiny load could get almost 240. I mean,
I know, but
you got to get that fixed.
They don't want to. They don't want to get involved. They say you're gonna have to pay us for this very expensive across the two hots test to prove to us that there's a problem before we fix it.
Well, one of the guys in the Philly group had that kind of a problem where they didn't want to do it, and he had an electrician come out. The electrician told him, it's not in your house, it's the power company. If they don't fix it, take action. And the power company finally came out and found out that the neutral line from his house, he had buried cable going back to the pole, had a corroded connection, which was intermittent. They came out, they ripped it all up, and they fixed it. I had another problem with the power company in Maryland, where I was getting all kinds of fluctuations on the voltage. And they said, oh, well, that can't be a problem. You know, we can come out and measure it, but it's not. Well, I sent them a scope trace of the sine wave coming in, and it looked like it was made with a saw. And so finally they came out and they found out that one of the power factor correction devices on the pole had some capacitors that were bad, and they would switch in and out and cause all kinds of problems. I mean, there's bad stuff out there, and the power company, of course, doesn't want to do it. And I just, in my case, I just sent them the scope trace. I said, okay, guys, explain this to me. While they were out there, and they finally fixed it.
Well, it's tied into infrastructure and cost of upgrading the infrastructure too, because a lot of this stuff's been out there for 40, 50, 60 years. I mean, you look at some of these creosote soaked poles and they don't look like they have any creosote left in them, and they probably don't. And then you figure when they put them up, you know, the transformers and so forth. I know there was an incident down here that happened maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where they had the high voltage feed line, evidently accidentally, somebody either hit the pole or the line broke or something, and it hit the 210 lines or the 240 lines and jammed like 6 kV down a few people's into a few people's houses, literally blew equipment up right there on the spot. TVs and so forth were literally blown up when it happened. And there was a big to-do because the power line company was trying to say, well, it really wasn't our fault. It was Mother Nature. And, you know, but eventually I believe they were taken to court, and they had to pay for the damages that were done in, I think, 3 or 4 houses. And it was quite severe. They luckily didn't have anything catch on fire in the houses, but it certainly did a number, blowing up a lot of stuff that was plugged into the wall.
By the way, I have 2 load centers coming into my house, because the house is all electric. And what I did on each load center, I put one of these whole house surge protectors that Eaton makes, and they're like orders of magnitude, you know, better protection. If you get a direct lightning strike, forget it. But short of that, it will protect everything in the house. It'll destroy itself, but it'll protect everything in the house.
Yeah, I understand there was somebody who had one of these hooked into, or they had them put in at one of the, I think it was a Ford assembly plant, and lightning hit the plant, and they were using it to protect all the robotic machines that they were using. And the surge arrestor literally, it was luckily on the outside of the building, but it literally exploded. and blew shrapnel all over the place, but all the equipment was spared, thank God. Or it
that
would have
will
been
happen.
millions of dollars.
Better that than all the equipment blowing up, though.
Yes, that's the
As
way.
long as-
What's it called? A whole house surge protector?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the company Eaton, EATON, they make an
Yeah.
awful lot of electrical equipment, and they have a whole bunch of models. But this one goes directly across line 1 and line 2 and ground. And if there's any major problems, it's like the surge protectors you get in the power strip on steroids.
Tom, put a reference to this in the chat, please.
Okay, I will.
It's a
What
good
I'll
way
do
to
is I'll go out while we're in the meeting and I'll pick a link on Amazon and you can go from there.
Yeah, it's a good way to share info.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
okay,
thing I
will
would
do.
not suggest is doing what I did on a trip to Australia. I had an electric strip that was set for 120, and I plugged it into a into a 240 line in Australia, and it was a very loud bang, and it blew the breaker to the hotel room when I did it. And they had to get maintenance to come in to reset the breaker, and it blew the daylights out of the electric strip I had. I had to throw it out and get another one. So be careful if you're traveling abroad with a U.S. electric surge arrested strip, because if you plug it into the wall, you may wind up with a very loud firecracker.
Okay, Ken, you ready? Zoom Meister?
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Ken, are you running this meeting?
No, there's another guy named Ken who's running the meeting, who distributed the
Where is
Zoom.
he?
Ken Schwartz?
Ken
Yeah.
Schwartz. Where is he?
I don't know that he's here.
No, I don't see him.
We don't see him.
Yep. I
he
suppose
set up-
I'm in charge. I
Oh.
mean,
Yeah.
what's up?
Who is Richard? Richard is?
Me?
I am.
No.
Nick.
Nicholas.
Nicholas. Oh, okay. All right, I was hoping for a little bit larger crowd. I'm not sure why they didn't tune in. Probably because everybody's already heard most of my shtick. How many of you here, with a show of hands, have heard about my image model theory for stereo? I know Tom has. Well, maybe I'm in luck then. Anyway, if it's your first time, I'm grateful to the BA. What?
Excuse me, Gary. I have to bail myself around 3s, but it's not anything against what you're doing. I wanted to mention that. So,
since there's not that many here, I'll try to get through it more simply and quickly, but I would like to present it. It's being recorded, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get any reactions from anybody after they watch a recording. Anyway, I'm grateful to the BAS for allowing me to present, and thanks to Alvin Foster. And I want to say a couple of things before I get going. I'm going to say a few controversial things that you may or may not have heard before, but I want you to hear me out, and then I'd like to make it more interactive, so I would encourage questioning, and you can stop me because I want to try to step you through a certain critical middle section of this thing, and I would like to have some participation.
Go for it.
I'm going to say that stereo theory has less to do with the human hearing mechanism than it does with sound fields in rooms. This is important because the confusion between binaural and stereophonic has stumped loudspeaker development for the last 50 years or so, and I'm trying to figure this stuff out too, and I wish that I could have a little help from the world with it, and so my presentation.
Where do you live, by the way, Gary?
In Lakeland, Florida. Secondly, I would like to say, you tune in and you see all these YouTubers that seem to have the program knocked, right? You move your speakers a few millimeters here, there, and try this and listen, and suddenly everything locks into perfection. I don't claim that. I just want to try to talk in general about engineering sound in rooms. So let's get going. If I can get my screen shared and my program up.
You could do it up there too.
It's a slideshow from beginning is what it is. All right. You got that?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Spatial audio. And boy, do I have a lot to say when you're ready.
All right.
Go ahead.
Good. Can you see this with the picture boxes on the right? This is what I see.
Yep.
Anyway, I want to cut to the chase, show you around a little bit. My room is 21 by 35 feet with a cathedral ceiling running in the long dimension. I've got a second room for the electronics adjacent to this one, and I do all the controlling with infrared relay for my home theater. And this is what it looks like.
Woo!
The screen,
Nice.
I got one of those in my room too.
it's about 16 feet wide and 5.5 feet high.
That's a 235 screen.
3-to-1. 3-to-1. It's supposed to be 3-to-1.
3-to-1.
And this is a Cinerama movie that was changed to, put on disc, obviously. It's not the original 3-screen Cinerama converted, I don't believe, but it's called a Cinerama movie, and it's the widest format you can buy. But it fits on there, so I lucked out. And if you want to include the wife acceptance factor, you get one of these. And the center seat would be the stereo seat. And the other two seats are almost as good because of the way I do my sound.
Yep.
The adjacent room with all the equipment in it, which you don't want to see in your home theater.
Is that an Onkyo?
Yeah. I can do editing for audio and video in the electronics room, but I recently discovered, to my great delight, that I can bring my laptop into the actual listening room and edit audio in there and hear the results of my editing immediately and make judgments about the directions of sounds and everything. And it's very interesting because, I'll get to the surround sound editing later, which is obviously easier in the actual studio than in the electronics room. These are my speakers. They're called Image Model Projectors for the function that they fill. Namely, you can adjust the radiation pattern with volume pots on top for the front two faces. I want to show you the history of human hearing research for a reason. Number one, to show how much work has gone into psychoacoustics and how we hear directions. And then I want to go into auditory perspective systems, where we put that knowledge to use. And then the speaker positioning gets down to some practical rules about engineering sound in rooms, YouTubers and me, and then virtual reality. I'm not getting too deep into that because I don't understand it that well yet. I haven't got as much experience with it as Alvin and I were hoping that I would have by this time. But the Greeks didn't even understand how you could hear something that was way over there from where you were. They called it the there-here problem. Well, they didn't call it, but our modern researchers called it the there-here problem. How can you hear that instrument when you're standing over here? They didn't know about sound going through the air and stuff. So here's some elements of psychoacoustics that have been done throughout the years. Fechner in 1860, he was there, Blauert. He asked, how can you localize sound when there's no dimensions of space? I don't know what he means by that, but they struggled with questions like these. Strutt and Rayleigh, 1876. The phenomena of binaural audition, Thompson, around 1878. Localization of actual sources of sound, 1934. Experimental psychology, head movements and vestibular something or other in sound localization, Wallach, 1940. Head movements, this guy, Wallach, set up a bunch of speakers and he operated signals into each one to see how well we could localize which one was making that sound. This is MLD, I think, 1948. Masking level differences. Jeffress in 1947. All these guys are trying to figure out how in the hell we can hear direction so well. The precedence effect. They started figuring out the sound that comes first is the one that takes precedence in localization. Okay, auditory perspective systems. Obviously, research into psychoacoustics is linked to human hearing mechanism. Coding of spatial position, this, that, and the other, pinna, auditory canal, eardrum, HRTF, all this stuff. When it came to stereo, naturally they're going to assume that we need to study human hearing in order to reproduce these sounds if we want to use speakers and stuff. Say, in any book you've ever opened on stereo starts out with a human hearing mechanism, right? You got two speakers, two ears. You can hear any sound and anywhere in between those two speakers by means of summing localization. Two speakers, two ears, right? Okay, that's all we need to know. We're done. Put the sound from two microphones into two speakers and send it to your ears, and the ear brain takes care of the rest. Harvey Fletcher and William Snow, stereo and binaural are going to be continually confused with each other. This is Clement Adder's experiment, and obviously it's a binaural experiment. I don't know what he used for microphones, but the receivers were two telephone receivers in the audience's availability. And so you see how they wrote that up. The theatrophone is telephonic transmission where listeners received a separate channel for each ear, enabling stereophonic perception. It was this invention which gave the first stereo transmission of opera performances. It was really binaural, but they didn't know the difference, and they still don't. Alan Blumlein, a brilliant man, came up with the Blumlein microphones, the 45-degree cutter heads for discs, right? A lot of stuff. Two speakers, 60-degree triangle, two ears. We're done. The classic stereo geometry based on equilateral triangle. Bell Labs had a little bit of a different idea. They had the curtain of sound. Does everybody know what that was? Probably we all do. They envisioned auditory perspective systems as a curtain of an infinite number of speakers that could simply relay the sound waves from the stage out to the audience with the same directionality as the original sound that was on the stage, simplifying that down to eventually 3 speakers. But most of the world was 2-channel officially because of limitations in technology and the availability of stuff that you can buy and materials. We were kind of stuck on 2-channel stereo for quite a while, and we were quite happy. So the development of better and better stereo seemed to resolve itself down to a search for greater and greater accuracy. The accuracy of what? Compared to what? Anybody want to venture a guess on that one?
Yeah, my guess when they say accuracy is the most common thought is that it is a true reproduction of the original performance. However, who knows what the original performance was?
Well, my comment gets back to maybe it was live versus recorded, which AR tried a lot back in the early days of stereo and mono.
Okay, but
Yeah, that was speaker testing.
In particular,
well, they were transitioning from a live performer to loudspeaker playback in the same space.
Okay, but in particular, what element of the reproduction process compared to what other element? Is it the microphone signals compared to the output of the speakers?
Can I remind you of the shop talk where AR came on and discussed this with us on shop talk, and the moment of truth was that when you had the string quartet playing versus you had the recording playback on the AR3As or whatever was in the room, nobody could tell the difference. So I asked Mr. AR, whoever it was at the time, so why would people go to a concert? And he said, to hear the hall.
Right, okay.
My suggestion would be there are 2 possible things that relate to accuracy. One is you bring the performers into your room, and the second would be that you go into the original venue.
Well, all right. That's pretty conceptual, but is there anything in particular in the process between microphone and you that we are comparing to check accuracy? Frequency response?
Everything.
It has to be subjective.
All right.
It has to be subjective.
You got me.
Frequency. All right, I'll give you some of the things that are important to me. Broad frequency response, flat frequency response, dynamic range, relatively low distortion. Most importantly, the effects of my room. And as you can look behind me, I've done an awful lot working on the room. Another thing that is, I don't think, taken into account a lot is stored energy in the system, where energy gets smeared, and what it does is it steps on the smaller signals that follow, which very often are the reflections from the space that the original thing was recorded in, and that tends to collapse the soundstage in terms of depth and width.
Okay, is there anything that we can measure that would tell us whether that is going to be successful or not?
You can measure some things that will tell you if it's going to be really bad. I have not figured out all the things you have to measure and how to measure them for it to be really good. In my case, it's been a lot of experimentation.
Okay. Well, let me just press on. The accuracy of what compared to what? My big idea is this. The most difficult concept in audio is trying to put over what is the object that we are trying to reproduce. Is it microphone signals? No. It's an acoustic event that occurred in front of the microphones. It's not signals for the ears. It's the sound in rooms. I think everybody has agreed with that so far.
Yep.
Okay. So we've been making sound with directional speakers in boxes with all the drivers on the front until something happened.
901.
If you read no other papers on stereo or speakers or anything else, I would recommend this. This is the 1968 paper that Bose wrote to explain all about the reverberant field, the direct field, what it is that we hear when we go to a concert, the whole deal. This is the two papers that were published as one in around 1973 that attempt to explain the development of the 901. And you guys are old enough, along with me, we're all old enough to remember the impact that the 901 had. Some might disagree with that because they didn't end up liking that particular speaker, but it built a factory on a mountaintop, and it was quite a thing when it came out. But my problem was I was an original 901 owner, but I went to England and I started reading all this stuff that those folks wrote about stereo imaging. I said, what the hell are they talking about? Stereo imaging. All right, you can tell where everything is on the stage, right? Okay. Can I hear that? And I had to admit, no, I can't hear it with these speakers. It's very spacious. It sounds pretty good frequency-wise, but I can't pinpoint the soloist.
Did you do that in a auditorium?
No, in my room, in my house in England, where they have hard plaster walls. I had my speakers positioned like the owner's manual recommended, a 1.5 feet from each wall, the front wall and the side walls. So I was about to go out and listen to some quads or something, and I decided to hesitate for a minute and move my speakers around and see if I position my speakers the way these blokes do their speakers, would that make any difference? So I moved them out a couple of feet and in a couple of feet closer together, and holy mackerel, I fell on the floor. All of a sudden, the center soloist was a tightly focused little ball of sound that sounded like a head floating between the speakers. The image in my mind was this person is all of a sudden standing there singing. And I said, holy crap, it's not, the reflected part is not a problem with imaging, it's what causes the imaging. And as you move the speakers around, it moves the reflections around. If I could just figure out what scheme to use in order to make this perfect, I could, but the first thing I had to do was to write to Bose and tell him he's got to change his manual. So eventually, long story short, I got to the factory. I met him, and he wasn't going to buy that he should change his manual to make people put speakers in a certain spot or they wouldn't sound good. And then their chief engineer, Joe Varanth, pulled me aside. He says, you know, if you want to understand reflected sound easier, you don't draw spider webs of reflections. You'll never figure out anything from that. You draw the reflections as mirror images of the speakers on the other side of the walls. then you can see where the reflections are positioned. I said, wow. I went home and I tried to figure out what would be the best way to draw where speakers should be positioned because of the way their early reflections positioned themselves. So I figured it all out. Go ahead.
I just want to interrupt for a second and say, tell me you were listening to an acoustic event that was recorded.
Yes. Well, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The center
As opposed
solo
to a studio hyper mixed event. Is
Right.
that what you mean?
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Well, any recording. Anyway, it imaged finally when I put them in the position that I determined by listening was the way to go, which happens to be a quarter of the width of the room in and the same amount out from the front wall. So I wrote this all up and I called it an image model theory for stereo, and I put an assumption in there that we haven't really had a stereo theory to work with. We've all been just free floating on our own. So here's the deal. You got to position your speakers a certain way. You got to have a certain direct to reflected ratio. You've got to you got to know where the reflections are going when you move speakers around, and so on and so forth. And that stereo has been confused with binaural all this time because we have always assumed that we need to mimic the human hearing mechanism, 2 speakers, 2 ears. And that is not the way it works. Well, they read that and they didn't believe a word of it. They said I'm crazy, so I had to, I went home and I published an allegory called The AES Goes to Mars. I'll let you read that there for a second. I wanted to make it 100 years after this when the AES got a little smarter.
Trinaural, huh? 3-eared Martians. Where's their middle ear?
I'll show you. I got a picture of one.
You ever hear the Chirkindeus?
Huh?
There was a children's story called the Chirkindeus, which was born of an egg that all the different animals sat on, so it came out partly all these different animals, and he only had 1 ear in the middle of his head. That's all.
That's close. Anyway, imagine this. We find out that there really are Martians out there, and there's Venus people and others. But they don't all have 2 ears like we do, but they do like music. And they can all go to a concert just fine. Doesn't matter how many ears they have or what their hearing mechanism is. They can all go to a concert and enjoy the same concert. But when it comes to reproduction, the Martians had been using trinaural headphones because that's all they knew how to do. And then they met these Venus guys who had 5 ears, and us with 2 ears, and they said, how can we make recordings and reproduce them for everybody to enjoy? Now, should I ask the group any answers on that one?
2 channels are all you need to start with.
2 channels are all you need, but what about the 3-eared guys?
You can derive a center channel from them.
I think you want to look at it another way. And Gary, I know you're going to go into this, so bear with me if I upstage you just a bit. Because Gary and I have had this discussion many, many times. There are 2 ways to look at sound and the way your brain perceives the sound. There is the quote normal way, where sound is produced externally from your head. And it is outdoors, in a room, whatever. It's produced externally from your head. Then there's the other way, where the sound is produced inside your ear canal, i.e. using headphones. And
Yeah.
those two are fundamentally different.
Right.
If you are looking at sound that is created inside your ear, then your brain does not have any advantage of your individual head-related transfer function. And now you would have a problem with the Martians and the Venusians and the humans. However, if, as Gary is talking about, creating a sound field external to the air, then that sound field, whether a Martian walks in or a human walks in, they will perceive it with what they are used to since the day they were born, or maybe in the case of Martians, hatched, who knows. Their brain has worked with their head-related transfer their whole lifetime, and therefore the sound field will be perceived through their individual head-related transfer. So if you can create the sound field, it should work for everybody. If you're talking about having headphones, that the headphones are in the auditory canal, then you have to have some way to reference everybody's individual HRTF. And some people are going in that direction, but that's not what we're talking about here. So I look at it as, if the sound is created external to your head, then it is a field. And now, what do you want to do to create a sound field? Regardless of what kind of sound field you want, what are you going to do to create the sound field? That's
Tom Homan's answer is, the first thing you do is you create front wide channels.
Well, all I'm trying to get across is that there is a difference between creating the sound in the ear canal versus creating it in a space. And now I'll let Gary go into his method of how he creates a sound field.
Let me continue with the development of this thought, because it's important to understand how to create an auditory perspective system in a room versus a binaural system. You might have a 3-eared Martian. They might even have an ambisonic hearing system where they hear in ambisonic A or ambisonic B, or even 5.1 format, or whatever. It doesn't matter what their hearing mechanism is. If they enjoy a live concert, they can enjoy a field type reproduction system. We got to go back to what I said was, there are two ways to reproduce a sensory experience. That is, in your vision system or in your auditory system. Sensory experience, okay? Direct sensory input, like headphones, or you can reproduce the object itself and just let all the beings sit down and listen. For example, if you're talking about vision, you want to show these guys what Queen Elizabeth looks like. You can either take a 3D picture, but for the Martians, with their 3 eyes, it would have to have 3 lenses and be reproducible to him with 3 imagers, right? So that doesn't work. That's a direct sensory input where your hearing or vision mechanism matters. But in a field type system, if you reproduce the object itself as a wax sculpture of Queen Elizabeth, then everybody, every little character that wanders into your planet can go up to her and look her over. They can see what size and shape she is, what colors her skin and clothes were. And that is the object itself. For audio, we're talking headphones as a direct sensory input. Has to be created with a dummy head, right? That mimics the sensors of your head. The object itself is loudspeakers in rooms. And that's what we need to realize in order to do it right. You got a head-related system, binaural, versus a field-type system, stereophonic or surround. And I lump stereophonic and surround in the same type with field-type systems. If you can create the sound in the room, you've got the problem licked. It also involves acoustics, of course, because making the sound in another room requires the acoustics to support what you're trying to reconstruct in there.
By the way, physics has gone through the same transition. There are no longer objects and forces in physics. There are just fields.
Oh, yeah? Like,
so it really is a kind of evolution away from particularization and into something more general. So, for example, things like entanglement and all that stuff and wave particle duality is subsumed under field theory. So it's really nice that you're doing that.
Well, you're beyond me there. What do I got next? Stereophonic and surround sound are field-type systems which have nothing to do with the human, Martian, or any being's hearing system. Okay, this is the controversial part. But in order, what I'd like to advance everyone to is to study sound fields in rooms. You need to study direct to reflected ratios. You need to study the spectral and temporal and spatial characteristics of sound fields in rooms. Spatially, we need to talk about the direct, the early reflected, and the reverberant fields. For some reason, Bose only talked about the direct and reverberant fields. He left out the early reflected fields. I don't know why, and he wouldn't answer that, but he just, in a concert hall, you don't have much of an early reflected field, you just have the reverberant field all around, right? That may be why.
But the early reflections are incredibly important.
That's right.
The reason why he did not want to address it is early reflections can cause problems, other problems in the sound field. It can cause congestion. Your brain does not deal nicely with early reflections as it does with intermediate reflections, which are ambience, and late reflections, which are echoes.
Right. And in a concert hall, sometimes you got a 5 or 6 second reverberation time, right? But as long as it reverberates and falls off smoothly, it sounds really good. So we talk about spectral, which is frequency response, temporal, which is reverberation time, and spatial, which is, can you see this drawing?
Yes.
Okay.
What is spatial?
Spatial is the directions from which sound images come. You remember Siegfried Linkwitz's drawing here? Mm-hmm. It shows the reflections as a mirror image on the other side. Now, let's get down.
I don't know what mirror image means, well, really.
Hmm?
I don't know what mirror image means in this case.
If you can see this whole drawing, mine is blocked off by the boxes of our faces, but the sound reflects just from the nearby walls, just like light reflects from a mirror.
Okay.
I'll show you.
The speakers are facing forward and the reflections are behind it.
Yeah, that's a problem with direct firing speakers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get down to basics on speaker positioning and engineering sound in rooms. What I have observed in all of the videos that I've seen of these guys trying to tell you how to do stereo is that they are completely unaware of the spatial nature of sound. When they move their speakers around, they talk about frequency response effects, and they do talk about imaging because everybody wants good imaging and can hear it when you get it, but they don't relate it to the early reflected sound in their rooms at all, as if they're not aware of it.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to make one point. When you talk about reflected sound and you talk about reflected light, you have to take into account, if you're dealing with light, is the light collimated or is the light diffuse? And you've got the same situation with sound. Is the sound very sharply defined or is it diffuse?
Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. So for the YouTubers, I would offer a more organized engineering way of moving speakers around and designing speakers and relating the image model of the sound in your room to the image model of a typical live sound field. The broad categories of things that matter are radiation pattern, speaker positioning, and the acoustics of the room itself, the reflecting surfaces in the room. Like I said, if you try to imagine speaker positioning and stuff with the vector diagram technique, you go nuts. I like the image model, which shows the images of these two speakers create reflected images of 6 more speakers behind the walls around them. Now you can see the positions of everything.
But your speaker is away from the wall, is that right? So you must have subwoofers in the system? Because your front pair are away from the wall.
I like the SAT sub system because it gives you more the flexibility of the radiation pattern in the satellites, but the subwoofers the directionality doesn't matter that much. So my correct position is 1/4 of the room width in from the side walls and out from the front wall. What that creates is a network of speakers and reflected images that are perfectly evenly spaced from each other. If you deviate from that, you can tell with a diagram of this type what happens to your sound. If you've ever wondered what causes a hole in the middle, here you go. Too close to the corners. Also, as Richard has alluded to, if you have speakers that are sunk into the walls or shoved into the corners like a Klipschorn or something, it can't have these extra images around it, can it? So maybe
Correct.
That's something to think about. Maybe if we take a look at the image model of live sound, this is a typical live sound. You can imagine the reflections of the instruments as additional sources on the other side of the wall. This is a technique in architectural acoustics that they use to design concert spaces, I guess. I mean, they could use it. It's not exactly a mirror image, but you want to get the spatial nature of the sound on the stage to have some spaciousness like this, right? If you compare that...
When you have multiple images, don't you get interference between them?
Only if you
Yes.
don't do the room right. For example, this is superimposing the image model of your speakers onto an image model of a typical live sound field. The spatial nature of the reproduction is the same as the live model. Now you see what I mean by spatial nature. The result is, if you had only box speakers, the imaging tends to be like this. If you have more omnidirectional speakers, it tends to image in a plane behind the actual speakers and from wall to wall in the front wall. And that is because of these extra sources, especially if they have more output to the rear than to the front. Sound familiar? Dipoles are a particularly interesting case.
I was going to ask you about them.
If you take a pair of good dipoles and position them as I suggest, and angle them in 30 degrees, the rear of them will also be angled out 30 degrees, and the corner secondary reflection will be at its strongest with that angle coming back to you, and it will happen to be, that will be the deepest and the widest part of your total sound stage, which if you turned this in any different way, you'd screw it up. Like a lot of people take their dipoles and they put them straight on, right? So the reflection is just straight behind it, and it just comes straight back out, and it misses the listeners, and it doesn't help with spaciousness or depth or anything else. These speakers sound particularly good, as a lot of audiophiles have said, and that's why. What else? This is the general case. I call these the corner secondaries. They're the most important reflections. They're caused by a 30-degree angle between that face of the speaker and the wall. Brings the sound back to you in the strongest possible wave. Whereas the front face is also at 30 degrees inward, aimed more toward the listener on the right side of your sofa, and the same for this one, aimed at the listener on the left side of the sofa for a sort of a cross-firing effect for time intensity trading. Keeps the center image stabilized. The greatest possible depth of imaging and time intensity trading and evenness of all of the real and virtual images is the grand plan that I see for speaker positioning, radiation pattern. We'll get to acoustics in a minute. So what that led me to was a speaker that is something like mine, only it has faces that are angled at 30 degrees instead of 45 degrees. It's got volume controls on all four faces to enable you to shape the radiation pattern to your room. You might want less direct sound, you might want more, you might want this, that, or the other. You might want actual volume pots on the speakers, or you might want electronic controls at the listening spot. And that's what such a speaker might look like. I made
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
I made a styrofoam model of the speaker that I would like somebody to make for me, but I don't know how to make speakers, so I just made a model of a speaker. And it's reversible. If you turn it around, it's got gold fascia, and the drivers are all the same, so you can adjust the imaging to your room. What else? Acoustics.
And they're dipoles or bipoles?
They're multi-directional speakers. They're image model projectors.
But they're in phase.
They have one set of input terminals, do they not?
Yes, they could have.
And if I apply a battery to them, do the cones all move out? Do they all move in, or do the front ones move out and the back ones move in, or?
If you had a single input, like the right channel, into that speaker, and you had volume pots on all four faces, that would be adequate. You could also have different inputs to all four faces and control the radiation pattern electronically, couldn't you?
I'm just trying to understand what your model is.
because a dipole, the rear output is out of phase from the front output.
No.
And so that changes whatever you're going to get reflections,
Well,
I assume.
mine is a bipole.
Right. But my KLH9s were dipoles, and I outgrew them very quickly and sold them to Dr. Land of the camera, who bought them from me at a nice price.
Oh yeah.
In 1980 or something.
All right. If you had a speaker like this, and if you reversed the connection on the rear drivers, they'd become a dipole, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
All right.
I'd like to give you a little personal experience because I've had many different kinds of dipoles. I've had Janssen electrostats, I've had Heil AMT1s, I've had Bollinger Graebner RD75s. And I can tell you, in a room that I had in Chicago where I was able to get the dipoles significantly away from the front wall, they sounded good.
Yeah.
What happened originally with Linkwitz, he said that you need about 5 meters from the front wall. Then he built the Orions, and he realized that nobody was going to buy the Orions because they couldn't move them 5 meters from their front wall. So he
15 feet.
Yeah, and he generally backed off. And in his later discussion says, "Well, with the Orion, you could be 4 feet from the front wall." Here again, the problem of a dipole configuration or any configuration is if you get early reflections, it tends to mess up the sounds. With the dipole, when you pull it way far away from the front wall, you don't get early reflections from the front wall. And the dipoles will cancel at the sides, so they eliminate problems with early reflections from the front walls. And if you have a line array like the RD75, where it is basically a cylindrical wave launch, you don't have early reflections from the ceiling and the floor. Once you start getting early reflections with a typical dipole placed too close to a front wall, you run into problems.
Right.
And that's personal experience.
It's just boring. They're boring when they're up against the wall.
Early reflections tend to cause congestion, and you lose the detail and the texture of the sound.
And let me tell you what I found when I had I made a box speaker that had speakers on all the faces for a certain reason. Anyway, in this model, I found that if you don't diminish or almost get rid of this particular reflection, as you walk from side to side, the whole soundstage collapses to that side.
Right.
That's why it's correct to try to diminish the first sidewall reflection. Then this is the most important reflection, and obviously the more output to the rear of each speaker, the more it lights up these reflections and causes a harmless image shift toward the reflecting surfaces, which is what makes the sound image in this plane rather than speaker to speaker. And it makes it deeper and it makes it wider. So you learn a lot by doing a multi-directional speaker and studying the model. People that are making direct firing box speakers, don't seem to know anything about this. And so nobody is helping to develop this concept, which is how to reconstruct a stereo image at home from a concert recording.
But you're still using the head model if you're talking about two basic speakers. The two basic front channel speakers from which you're hoping to get everything. It's
confusing, isn't it?
It's depressing because in the room that I'm in, I have a 13.2 surround system from my Marantz receiver, and I've added another 8 channels of surround from my Lexicon T1. And I've learned it just in the last DC one, and I've learned in the last just month that my whole experience in this room depends on playing the lexicon 6 extra channels loud enough. There's a
Yeah.
moment, all of a sudden, I don't want to go to bed because I'm in another space. I am
Yeah.
really somewhere, but it has to come from behind you.
Yeah, I have learned, well, I have proposed in the last video or presentation that I made to Smootums that surround sound become the new paradigm for
Yeah.
auditory perspective systems, because stereo is just not enough.
Stereo is just means solid, and that
Yeah.
doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't give you the other dimension.
It's too easy to confuse stereo with binaural because it's two speakers and you got two
That's right.
ears. And so people think that's how it works. But if you want to place sounds in rooms rather than in ears, you go to surround sound, and those people seem to understand it a lot better. So all
Holman
speaker
and
systems,
Jim Allen. Yeah, go ahead.
all speaker systems should be surround sound, where you can place images anywhere that you need to in the mix. And
Yep.
you know what it sounds like live, so you know what it should sound like on playback, and you can't do that with just stereo. You need to study more about putting sounds in rooms, not in ears.
The Linkwitz, the current Linkwitz speakers really do that. With two speakers in a room in the right position, they really recreate the original sound field.
Is there a sweet spot, or can you move around?
You can move around some, but there is a sweeter spot.
Yeah, I wish I could hear them. I have heard so much about them from Absolute Sound. Tom Martin reviewed them, right? And I haven't been able to hear them.
I'm going to Axpona. They're going to be there. I know them. I'm trying really hard not to buy a set.
How much are they?
About 20 grand.
No.
I can
Yes.
tell you.
Yes. They're 20 grand, but that includes all the amplification, electronic crossover.
Oh man, okay.
I can tell you that if you have just two speakers in a room that is not causing a lot of early reflections, and you have good time alignment of the drivers, and you can produce a very realistic sound stage, but it will not go past the speakers. If it's going past the speakers, you're getting room effects. And room effects, if they are early reflections, now Gary is very lucky, he's got a huge room, so he doesn't run into early reflections. My room is 20 feet long by 16 feet wide, and I can tell you that if you don't do something with room treatments, you will get early reflections off the ceiling and the walls, and it will cause problems with the detail and the resolution of the image. If you do it properly with two speakers, you can get a huge sense of front to back depth. You can place images on the stage, not to a tenth of a millimeter, it's not going to happen. But you can place images on the stage, but it will not do what Gary's system is doing. It will not get the sound beyond the lines between your ears and the speakers.
Right.
Okay, let's get into acoustics, and I want to draw you a picture of the kind of sound that I'm getting here, if you'll bear with me. Acoustics, like Tom says, this matters a lot. He had his room done by Grimani, and that seemed to help whatever needs he had in his room. We both have a friend named Ron Bauman who runs InSound Omega Micro, and he happens to have a cabin where he has put his system that has amazing imaging. Everybody that goes there says, wow, I've never heard imaging sound like this anywhere. And his walls look like this. he put up all these half logs all around, and his wife helped to decorate this artistic, you might call it, diffusion everywhere. My theory is that if you want to diminish or remove the signature of the sound that tells you the size and shape of your listening room, it's diffusion that does that. And I conclude that from this sort of thing. And if that's not enough, this is George Massenberg's Blackbird studio in Nashville.
Woo! What a shame he doesn't like music.
It's nothing but pegs. It's not absorption. It has to be pure diffusion, right? That's the way I see it.
But he's got lots of speakers around, which is my technique. In the room that I'm in, there are speakers on the ceiling and all over the place, and they're all unified together.
Yeah.
So that I can take them in and out and have most of the sound field generated by the surround system.
Yep.
And I can, if you have a minute, can I give you a guided tour? Because I want to make sure you see this room before we part.
All right. Let me finish up.
Yeah.
I might go into VR here.
Yeah.
I'm using a Zoom a Zoom H3 VR recorder. It does ambisonics, first order ambisonics.
How many channels does it record in?
4.
4, okay.
Here's the interesting part of that. They have a program that converts it from ambisonic A to ambisonic B, and from B it can convert it to anything from mono to 5.1, including, they claim, binaural, but I don't know if I believe that. But here's the thing. You bring the laptop into your listening room, and then you put the 6 channels of the 5.1 on your laptop, and you have to be able to figure out which drivers can make the program map the channels correctly. There's MME, there's ASIO, and there is Wasapi. Is that familiar to anybody out there? Do you record? Anyway, you take these channels, which are left, right, center, LFE, left surround, and right surround, and you steer them anywhere you wish in your listening room. The directions are obvious for left channel, center, and right channel, and left rear and right rear. And you can actually do object-based panning instead of just channel-based. And you can make the sound come out anywhere from right at the speaker to over here in each channel, and you can just shape the sound field the way you want. And I've recorded a couple of symphonies like that, and I can tell what I'm doing now that I'm in my listening room doing all this stuff. But on playback, you also need to know which mode of your receiver to use. When I do my mic check and I stand on the right side and then on the back and then on the left side and then up front of my microphones, then when I play it back, I expect to get those same directions on playback. It only happens when I'm in the correct mode, which is called multi-channel. It doesn't work in DTS Neural X. It doesn't work in Dolby Surround. None of the other surround modes work except plain direct multi-channel. For whatever reason, I don't care. I just need to know what mode to put it in to play it back on. And now I know, because I'm right here in the listening room. And when I play my sound, an ordinary stereo recording images something like this, from wall to wall in the front, right? That's what Tom was talking about. Most stereo comes out just speaker to speaker, and he can't get it to go much beyond that. I can with my reflected sound going around, but when I use 5.1 surround sound, it sounds like this. It actually can image the frontal sound stage beyond the corners of the wall, of the front of the room. Quite accurately, as a matter of fact. You can do a runaround with clappers and voice.
You're doing 5.1, but from a two channel, from two channels, or are you doing the 4.0 channel thing?
Actually, if you record in MS stereo, you can get this effect as well. Because MS stereo is almost ambisonic B format surround sound. I can get the audience applause over here and over here to the sides. I can get the good placement of all the instruments up front. And even some sounds can come from the rear. With just two channels recorded in MS stereo. Everyone know what that is?
Microsoft.
No. It's mid-side.
Mid-side. Oh, mid-side. Mid-front.
Yeah, one mic points straight ahead in a cardioid configuration, and the other mic is a bidirectional figure of 8, which records the left side straight away and the right side in inverse phase. In mixing, you can make them come out to left and right. So you can encode the sound anywhere from over here to around to the other side and almost to the rear. But with the H3 recorder, it's even easier and more precise as far as directionality. We haven't talked much about binaural itself, which is a whole nother subject. As for the sound path between the sound source and the auditory, between the sound event and the auditory event, there's a lot of elements in the sound path, like pinnae and ear canal and the eardrum, and of course the dummy head that records it. Somewhere in there we need to figure out precisely how to record and reproduce 3D audio, so that I'm thinking with a head tracker is part of the solution. I don't know, but if I ever have to go to a assisted living and lose all of this stuff,
right,
I'm gonna want to have something like this. If this can do the trick, because you can see 3D video in there, you can hear binaural audio. Is that the solution before we get to heaven or not? I don't know. But I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for a very interesting talk.
Gary, before we get too far, I just want to mention to the folks, Gary was kind enough to send me a recording he did of the Harrison School, and even on the stereo that I have, it is amazing. There is such depth, such detail. You can tell where the audience is. Everything up to the point, obviously, where you can't go past the speakers, but anything in there, front to back, his recording is great, and I use it as a test all the time.
Can you send it around?
Yeah, I might be able to.
I would love to hear what it sounds like in my room, which has 23 channels.
Okay, how do I get this thing back, Ken? I want to get back to the Zoom meeting. All right.
Hey, welcome back.
Jesus. All right, Richard, you had something.
I wanted to show you, recently, I've been living in this room after the divorce for the last 35 years. And I've only now finally figured out how to enjoy it to its fullest. And the secret was how loud to play the ambient channels. I'm playing them very loud. That there's a moment when it clicks in, and all of a sudden I'm somewhere else. And up until then, it's just stereo. It's just hi-fi. Then at a certain point, when the rear channels kick in, it's transformational. But let me just show you what I want to say. One thing about Tom Holman. Tom Holman wishes that the 5.1 paradigm, instead of having left and right side speakers, had left and right wide fronts, because for music, that's where you get the most information from having a delayed channel, because it interferes with, you don't need the room to provide your early reflections. You're doing it from within the music. So, and everything I play is 2 channels, including some of John Allen's recordings and BSO recordings. And there's a certain point when when the sound is over your head. It's not in the speakers at all. It's in the room and over your head. And in order to do that, you have to have, well, let me just walk around and show you where the speakers are.
This is what I call diffusion, by the way. That looks great.
Definitely diffusion. So part of the room that's my movie screen.
How big is that?
I have no idea. I remember for moments at a time, but that's the projector. It's a Sony projector with 3 laser beams in it, RGB laser beams, and it's like 15, 18 feet wide. I don't remember however high it is. And there's a regular flat screen TV that fits perfectly under the screen, so I don't have to put on the projector unless I'm going to do something very serious. But
Yeah.
going around the room, that's the left front channel.
You mean right?
That's the right front. I mean, I can't tell left field from right field in park. I have to be very careful. And that's the other front channel. But there is here, that's the front wide. It's a
Okay.
that it's the black box in the middle there. But there are speakers up there above the screen, which is what Dolby wants you to do, and Tom Holman doesn't want you to do. But I would just put them up there. There's a side. This is the regular side speakers, the black box in between among all the books. And above is another row of ceiling speakers to there. And then behind that, there's another row. There are 2 more rows of ceiling speakers. And when the seal and everything has a 2-channel source, but it can be broken up in such a way. But there's the algorithm, the surround sound program I use is ROHD, which I don't know if they're still in business because they didn't do very well. But it's
Oro 3D.
Oro 3D, yeah. That is the most musically beautiful system. It doesn't. Dolby and DTS sound terrible on music, but Oro 3D sounds wonderful, and it allows you to use front and by the way, so there's another. That's the rear. There's a rear setup, and in the back of the room, there's a whole nother channel of. The light is out, but there's a speaker back here in the back of the room that has its own input from an old Yamaha surround sound, so I can add a concert hall just in the very, very back speakers. And so which I can adjust perfectly to add just the right amount of reverb from very far away. But I find, and if you're ever in town, I'll be happy to show you. Nick and Dave are here every month, and I've only learned recently how to make it sound better by raising the ambience level from the receiver is this Marantz.
Wow.
Which
How
has,
you wired all that, I'd like to know, boy.
well, just one wire at a time, and then this is the Lexicon DC1, that adds another 8 channels to the thing. But the lexicon gets its front 2 channel inputs from the oral 3D front, left, and right channels. So the middle channel is already taken out if necessary before it goes into the system. Why am I only seeing you? I'm not seeing me here. But the idea is you can't possibly make yourself happy with 2 speakers. You gotta, and I have, the ceiling has blown up. Before that, I blew the paper mache onto the ceiling. It was really terrible, the acoustics. But once the sound deadening was in on the ceiling, then I could really hear the speakers and not just hear the room. And that's been perfect, done a perfect job there for 30 years. But
yeah, it seems my complaint is that the movie people seem to be more able to engineer the sound in a room, like I wish that everybody could. The stereo people, or even simple surround sound systems, don't seem to be able to communicate to us how to engineer the sound into a room in any scientific way. We're all on our own, and
you start from 2
you,
channels. I think all you need is a little sound bar, and that's it.
yeah.
But these multi-channel guys are starting with a 5.1 or bigger mix.
But however, they don't have front wides. And that's where you're going to get most of the musical stuff that you're talking about with the speakers that you presented today, because you're getting the equivalent of an additional sound source that's as though reflected off the room. But it's great because when the front wides are in, all of a sudden there are people standing between the center, between the front left and right speakers and the front left and right wide. There's people there. You can pinpoint the image outside where the speakers are, especially in jazz and combo groups where people are wandering around the stage. It's really great. But
Yeah, well, I'm not, I don't really care how you do it, but you need to have a way to widen your sound stage, and you need to get the sound stage right first before you start extending to surround sound. And it doesn't matter if you do it with speakers or with reflections, if you know what you're doing.
But what the ambience does is all of a sudden, all of the sound, the orchestral sound, the instrumental sound, the vocal sound is in the air above your head and around you. There's no sense of front speakers when you have the ambience level, and yet you can spot the image. You can image people where they're standing. But
well, I never have any sound coming from a speaker.
Right, good.
I can't pinpoint the source as a speaker.
Right.
Just sound in the room coming from where it should.
I can tell you in my stereo system, unless the original recording puts the sound in a particular speaker, the speakers are not in the room. What you have, as I mentioned earlier,
which movies do.
I don't watch movies. This
is okay.
Strictly audio. And it's strictly in one prime spot. The whole room is optimized for that one spot. And when you are in that spot and you have a well-recorded piece, the speakers disappear. But as I said earlier, what it will not do is what Gary's system will do, and that is put you in a big space. What this does is it brings whatever the performance is into the room, limited by the width of the speakers. But what you do get when you do that is you get what I call an incredible sense of texture and detail. Detail that is not harsh. You can tell all the differences in the harmonics of a choir, a chorus. You can hear all the differences in the harmonics of the different brass instruments. They don't get mixed together by early reflections. So as you pick your poison.
Yeah, and Jim Gerfen points out, as have many others, that if it's a concert real stereo recording versus a multi-channel mix,
Yeah.
it makes all the difference in the world in hearing the sound go outside of the speakers and spread in front of you.
But if you start from 2 channels and you just play with it, there's a lot of magic you can do. If they're working with 2 channels and the right program spreads them into 22 channels.
What you also need to do if you're working with any number of channels, the transducers have to be good. You cannot you cannot have stored energy. It'll screw everything up.
That's interesting.
You have to have time alignment of the drivers at your listening position, which will change if you move your listening position. If you do all that, all of a sudden you get this incredible sense of the real people being in your room, not that you are in the concert hall.
I don't think there's any difference. It feels like you are in the concert hall and they are in your room. They're the same thing.
There is a big difference. I spent enough time going to the Philadelphia Orchestra and other orchestras around here that you get a sense of, if you're really at the orchestra, you get a bigger sense of involvement and, you know, surrounding sound. But you also don't get the messing up of the transients, and you also don't mess up the differences in the timbre of the instruments. And I think that's a problem when you get into a small room. If you get the sense of sound bouncing off all around you, it affects somewhat the ability to distinguish this texture and the sound that you get if you're at the hall.
Yep.
My observation on the "they are here" question is in stereo or surround sound, you're bringing the performers into your room, more of a "they are here" system, but in binaural, where the dummy head was placed where the performers were in the actual acoustic, it's more of a "you are there" system. And sometimes it doesn't make any difference, but sometimes it does.
That's true if the dummy head closely matches your head-related transfer function. I think what you're going to find in the future, and people are starting to experiment with this, is they will not be using a dummy head. They will be using just 2 microphones, and they will develop algorithms that more closely match what your head-related transfer function is doing and modifying that sound. That's probably, in the long run, is probably a better way to do it. But, you know, nobody had the processing or the idea of how to do that earlier on. And so they picked a universal, quote unquote, dummy head. But, you know, if you just take 2 microphones without a dummy head or without an algorithm to mimic your head-related transfer function, you got the sound in your head. It's not you're there, it's there in your head. So I think ultimately, you know, as you were talking, Gary, about this virtual sound, if they can get a way to more closely mimic your personal head-related transfer function, that will be an incredible thing. And by the way, a lot of this is being driven not by the audio business, being driven by the gamers and other businesses that are real businesses, not the audio business.
That's right.
What do you think about with loudspeaker binaural, like the Polk SDA or sonicalography? You have the sound coming from the speakers and going to your ears with crosstalk cancellation, but your ears and your PINA and your HRTF are not as much affected because you're using your own ears to listen to the crosstalk canceled sound, and you have no problem with head turning because the sound stays external. That might be one of the best systems yet.
By the way, just a little bit of information. When everybody always looks at what's happened recently and how we've made all these great strides forward in understanding sound. Years ago, I did a book report for Audio Amateur, and in the book, reference was made to somebody in the 1600s who was wondering what these floppy things on your head were. So what he did is he took brass tubes and he stuck them in the ear canal, and that mitigated the effect of the pinnae and the head, because now it was away from there. And the people he tested lost a lot of the ability to localize sound. We're not talking about speakers now. We're talking about people in live environments with sound. And then what he did is he made wax impressions of their ears and wax molds of their ears, stuck them on the ends of the tubes, and they were able to recover some of their ability to localize.
Whoa!
And this was in the 1600s.
No kidding. I wonder if Shakespeare did that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what I did with the article, but that was shocking to me that back that far, people were experimenting, trying to figure out what all these funny things on your head were and how they affected the sound.
Yeah, it's like that series of research articles I started with.
Yeah. And, everybody that talks about all the new stuff in digital and how it's, today's technology, and you go back and look at Bell Labs in the 20s and Nyquist and stuff, and you realize it's not today. It's been going on for a long time. If you want to know really where a lot of stuff happened, just go to Bell Labs.
Yeah, they're smart guys.
I don't know about you, but it's getting late. I've had a wonderful time. I can't walk as far as I used to.
Yeah, Gary, thanks not only for the presentation, because I know you've done just 1 or 2 hours worth of work in the background for all this. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thanks for letting me in. And Mr. Hadaway, how long have you been here?
He was
Can you hear us?
Hour late or something.
Did you hear half of it?
Yeah, about half of it.
Okay.
It was a really wonderful talk, and it gave us a historical sense of the problem that we all work out, which basically is wife acceptance factor.
Something to think about.
I got around that with 2 things. Number 1, I have a wife that likes music, and number 2, it's a dedicated room.
Right. I didn't help my marriage to have a dedicated room, but the idea is, you have to design a stereo system for one person at a time.
No.
But the 2-speaker model is hard not to have a sweet spot with everybody sitting in the stereo train.
Yes, but it depends. You can have a stereo system, and most people, even if they're not in a sweet spot, if it's a good system, it has good response, and it doesn't, muck up the transients and stuff, they'll be very happy with it because it's better than what they normally hear. But if you really want the best performance with the 2-channel stereo system, you got one sweet spot. I don't care. That's what I'm doing.
He's what? He's warily looking at me.
Is somebody's wife talking? She heard her name.
So yeah, Rich, you are correct that if you're going to have a wide seating area, you better do it with multi-channel, not just stereo. But if you're interested in getting a really good sound and you're willing to sit in one spot, I optimized everything to my one prime spot. You can do that, but if you move, it's not as good.
I love sitting in various parts of this room and getting as though I were in different parts of the hall. The greatest audio experience I ever had was in a church. A friend of mine was singing in the community chorus, and I hated the way it sounded. I was in the first row. I hated it was all anyway. I went to the back of the church, and I stood directly dead center with the center line between the rows of seats. And I've never had such good stereo imagery in my life, because and the minute I moved off center or I sat in a chair in one of the seats in the auditorium, it was lost. But even at, what was it, 50 yards? I don't know how long a church area is, but just being dead center and hearing the reflections off of the various walls on their way to, I could spot where everybody was in the chorus.
I can tell you I've been into a lot of different places, both over in Europe and in the US. And here in Philadelphia, since we moved up here 3 years ago, I spent a lot of time at Kimmel in the Verizon Hall, sitting at different places. And what I have come to reach as a conclusion is the more center and the closer you are in almost any hall, the more sense of transience, the more sense of detail you're going to get. And as you move further away, you get more sense of a total musical performance.
In Symphony Hall, I was in row M, and in the on the center aisle, and the 1 week the person behind me in row N wasn't there, so I went back and sat one seat back. A totally different image.
Yeah, it makes a difference, no doubt, no doubt. So this brings up the thing: what about if you're not working with a live recording that was done very well, not horribly multi-mic'd, and now you got a studio performance? What can you get out of it? And I think what you can get out of it, forget the sense of being in the room with the performers, because usually they're not even in the same room at the same time.
That's right.
But what you can do is you can get transients, dynamic range, and a sense of detail when you can hear what the guitarist is doing. Is he using a pick? Is he using his fingers? That kind of stuff you can get. There's no way to reproduce the original event because there was no original event.
The reason that we don't record from row M or N is that we, in the reproduction, we are placing our speakers at a distance in front of us. So we don't want to record from way back here and then reproduce it from way up there.
That's right.
You don't, it doesn't work out that way, and it's not the way it works. And I would leave you with a question, either Richard or Tom or anybody. Are visitors to your homes as amazed by your sound as you are yourself?
No.
I can tell you that everybody that's come to my house has been amazed at the detail and the clarity and the sense that the people are there. But I've had people come here who sit way in the back of the concert hall and they say, oh, it's too detailed. However, anybody who is not an audiophile, and by the way, a lot of people who don't listen to live music have been totally blown away with the detail, the dynamics. They come in and say, I'm listening to Queen. I never heard that. And I never heard that in Pink Floyd. I'm hearing stuff that's happening that I never heard before.
Right.
But people that do listen to a lot of live music and they like to sit in the back don't like the front seat, which is probably where the microphones were in the recording. So, you know, I tell everybody, you know, it's your hobby, it's your system. Don't let anybody tell you what it should sound like. If it doesn't float your boat, why bother? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you. Well, if you're ever in town, please let me know. I'm living in Newton, Massachusetts. And anytime anybody wants to have a demonstration, I'm retired. I do almost nothing to my great delight. And
do we have everybody's info in some directory at the BAS?
I think so.
You can always write for information.
If anybody wants to come down and
not public.
If anybody wants to come down and sample a Philly cheesesteak, please let me know. And I can tell you that the room rates at the Parazella B&B are very good.
I lived in Philadelphia for a year back when there was a Philadelphia General Hospital, and I did my psychiatric internship there. It was a great place.
I can tell you one good thing for me about living near Philly. I'm about 25 miles as the crow flies from Philly, but right in the town I live in is one of the SEPTA regional rail train stations. You can park at the train station for free. Being the old fart that I am, I get the senior rate, which is $0. It doesn't cost me anything to go in on the train. It doesn't cost me anything on the subway. Food is great in Philly. And almost every time that I go in for a concert, it costs me nothing but the concert ticket. I love it here.
What a life. Was it worth getting old?
You know, it beats the alternative. I can tell you I got lots of aches and pains, but I still am kicking. I'm out working in the yard. I work out 5 days a week on the treadmill and a rower. So I know it's going to catch up to me, but I'm going down fighting.
It's going to catch up. It's really every day you have to wake up and say, okay, I'm still here.
Yep.
There hasn't been a nuclear war yet.
When my dad was 92, he said, any day you can open your eyes is a good day.
And at that age, you have to get all the crust off your eyes in order to do that.
You got it. All right, guys, I got to bail. Thank you again, Gary.
Bailey, thank you very much. Live and be well, prosper, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice job. Thank you.